All right, Lucas Da Silva, Essie and Scrappy. First, it's been a week, man. Have you recovered?
Yeah, for the most part. So for those that don't know, I had an allergic reaction to something I ate over the weekend. So I had a real bad sore throat, a couple canker sores. It was bad. So that's why some of my postings have been a little less frequent. I apologize. Catching back up.
Nobody needs to know that. It's too
Physically,
much
I'm healed.
information.
Okay. Physically, I'm healed. Mentally, not as much, but that was never the case. So you know what I mean? It
Correct.
is what it is. How are you, old man? How you doing?
I'm doing great. It was a long drive back. We had a good time. And Fargo was a lot of fun, even though it was chaotic and there was tons of things going on. I'll tell you right now, the one thing I keep thinking about from Fargo that has stayed with me is they have got to separate the 16U and junior men. That first 2 days of competition was just chaos. I mean, they've got to switch that.
So I think they're going to do one of two things. I think they changed the format so they could bring in girls Greco in the next year or two. I think that was the reasoning. Because think about it, then you could do girls freestyle, boys freestyle, girls Greco, boys Greco. Or if they're smart, they do 16U freestyle, junior freestyle, 16U Greco, junior Greco. And they split it by age groups. So you'll have men and women wrestling at the same time.
Which would be okay. The problem is that with 16 men
rough.
and junior men going at the same time, even with 30 mats, man, you and I were just running all over the freaking place. So
I would say, and we even had Ward to help us, where some of the Florida guys, we kind of said, okay, Ward, he'll go cover them. And you and me were like, oh, Yannick Simon's up here, Gorman's there now. Crap, where are we going?
Correct.
And then of course, then you got to throw in the random, a South Carolinian here or there that would make a deep run. And it's like, oh crap, we got who's run over there now.
Yeah. So that would be my one thing that I if I were to give feedback, I would love to see them split it. But you and I made a post yesterday, and you and I were talking about it all through the tournament, the singlets and the Singlet Watch.
Singlet Watch.
Right.
Which, by the way, Team USA, they beat me to the punch. I said it obviously to the wrong person when I was up at Fargo. I blew my spot, but whatever, right? But yeah, Singlet Watch. But to you little children in the Instagram comments, those Florida singlets look like a coming attraction for the Finding Nemo movie. No, I refuse.
It's not just on Instagram. They had a lot of opinions on Facebook, and this is actually one of the ones where you and I disagree. And I actually like the Florida singlets. You not as much. I will say that Mr. Swan actually made a really good point, because I wasn't a fan of the Georgia singlets either. But the Florida and Georgia singlets, when they came up, all I had to do was lift my head, look around the 30 mats, and I could pick out a kid from one of those.
That's great. I mean, you got 10 lanes of traffic. You could pick out the one that has a car crash on it. That doesn't mean it's a good thing.
No, but for me, it was easier to find.
Georgia singlets, I get what they were trying to do, but the red one looks like hot Cheetos, and then the blue one, there's a pack of Doritos that it's like flaming dill, and it's a blue and a green thing. It looks like they just took the patterns from that and just threw them on a singlet. Like, that genuinely is what they look like.
I think actually Sammy Roundtree or Will Johnson actually said the red and the other one was the nacho cheese Doritos.
Yeah, no, it's hot Cheetos. That's all it is. So with Singlet Watch, this is what was interesting. So I remember during my time at Fargo, we were basically threatened with our life that we had to wear that year's team gear. So I want to make that clear. That Singlet Watch was based on the men's team gear for that year.
Right.
However,
and we saw lots of kids wearing older or dual singlets or whatever. So
I have compiled my all Singlet Watch, my all American singlets, my top 8 from Fargo.
All right, you gonna count down?
Yep, I'm gonna go from 8 to 1.
You can do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
In number 8, It's the pink New Jersey that had the New Jersey Devil on the side. For those that don't know, the New Jersey Devil is a mythological creature in New Jersey that it basically looks like a flying bigger bat, almost like dragon type dealio. And it basically is what the New Jersey Devils hockey franchise was named after. I really liked it. It had some great contrasts with some browns in there. I loved it. That comes in at number 8. For me, number 7, the blue Puerto Rico singlet was beautiful. I love the two-tone blue, the red symbol on the front. That see, I don't know the culture too much, so someone's gonna yell at me.
Yeah,
But
that symbol right here. Yeah.
it looks very. I almost want to say Mayan inspired. If I'm wrong, again, I'm saying this. I'm a history major, but that area of the world, Caribbean, I'm not as familiar in, so I'm saying that now. But still, a very, very beautiful singlet.
All right, 6.
Number 6 for me is the white Oregons. Those were so crispy. I believe the white was the red and the silver one was the blue. For me, the white one
the
was
wagon.
a touch. Yeah, the wagon.
Right?
The year that Oregon became a state, the font was beautiful. Mwah! Oh, those were gorgeous. Number 6.
Not usually a fan of white singlets, but boy, the crispness. It looked nice.
There's a way to do a white singlet, and that was the way to do it. Have minimal but darker colors so that the contrast is there. Look beautiful. Shout out Oregon.
5.
Number 5 comes from the state of Michigan. Those blue. It looked like the Motor City kind of inspired with the silver cross. Beautiful, in my opinion. I love those a lot. And I'm, fat and scrappy. That baby blue is my color. So you know what? It was beautiful to see. And it looked good. A lot of times if you do a baby blue singlet, it looks like washed and it doesn't look great. That one specifically looked really, really good.
4.
These 4 were really tough to distinguish, man. Like these were really close. For me, and at number 4, it's Team Connecticut, Hartford Whalers inspired. Both the blue and the red were absolutely gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know what the Hartford Whalers is, it was an old NHL team. I want to say from like the mid-70s up until the late 80s when they finally moved. But they are the only professional team to ever play in the state of Connecticut from the 5 major sports. So they took the logo, and if we were talking about gear packages for a second, their big shirts were hockey jerseys that the Hartford Whalers did wear. They inspired the design. Absolutely beautiful and a great touch to the state of Connecticut. They come in at number 4.
3.
Number 3 for me, man, it had to be the yellow New Mexicos. Those ones were so pretty. And
Jasmine Jenkins Bay is going to disagree with you on this.
I don't care. I'm not a yellow singlet kind of guy, right? I'm really not normally. But with the dark, it was almost a maroon how dark that red was, and the blue was almost more of a teal, but it was so dark, and the patterning I love singlets that embody the culture of the state. So bringing in some of the Hispanic influences along the leg piping, those were gorgeous.
Number 2,
a really tough one for me to distinguish between number 2 and number 1. But for me, the Techno Rhode Island ones were beautiful. And the Steve Ryan had like 3 separate singlets I saw on the weekend that were really good. The Techno ones were brilliant. There was one that had the anchor on the chest.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That was gorgeous. And then there was a third one that took more of the tidal waves, had it on those were all pretty. But for me, the Techno set comes in at number 2.
Number 1.
Number 1 for me, man, it was Colorado. Those might be my favorite singlets I've ever seen in my life. Both the blue and the red with the Colorado sea sun in the back, the mountains on the front, almost like they went early 80s with the font in that it's almost diagonal, but it's just straight enough. It was beautiful. Rudis did a fantastic job on that. And a shout out to, on the girls' side, I didn't rank the girls' singlets separately, Team Tennessee girls and Team South Carolina girls. Both of those singlets were absolutely beautiful as well.
So I'm gonna ask you about it because South Carolina to me is very similar to like the Florida. Florida went with kind of that theme. South Carolina went with the Mario Brothers theme. Are you good with the Mario Brothers theme?
So I feel like it's all about the way you do it. Florida, the problem was the fishes looked stupid. Like some of them, I think, had the IQ of a tin can. If you're gonna do it, if you're gonna do that, the fishes have to look fierce. They gotta look strong. They didn't.
They look cartoonish.
If you're doing Mario, we know you're taking the piss. We know this is for fun. We're having fun with this, and they did that. And then of course you had Estrada and them dressed up like Mario and Luigi at the finals.
Right.
Like when you play into it like that, I have to give you something. And I'm a guinea, so of course anything Italian I'm gonna love.
All right, so I'm gonna wrap this up with a shout out Alabama. I love the racing. I like the lettering that was a Talladega kind of, super speedway.
My blood round. Team Alabama was in my blood round. Texas's were in my blood round.
North Carolina should be in your blood round.
North Carolina's was really good. And then you could throw a couple out there that were also really good. I liked California's because I feel like if you're gonna do simple, you have to be really good to kind of pull it off, and they did. But yeah, that's my blood round. So fair play. North Carolina's were really good.
All right,
those were good.
So let's jump to Kyler Larkin and his singlet thing. Did you see this?
Speaking of singlets, yes, I did.
Speaking of singlets. So I'm going to share the screen with you.
I love it.
He says, can you see it?
Yes.
Hey, Flow Wrestling. Rumor has it that Kyler Larkin heard he was a number 2 seed at Fargo, decided he no longer needed his red singlet. He gave it away before the tournament started. That's what Vikings called burning the boats. Do you agree? First, do you think he really did it?
Oh, I know he did. No. I talked to my Arizona people. I said, did he actually do that? He sold it. He sold it to somebody. He actually did. But beyond that, bro, talk about calling your shot. I love it. No, I love that. Like, if you're that confident in yourself, man, that's I've done similar before. We were at a tournament. I want to say it was like my 7th grade year, and I was the 1 seed, and I didn't bring my blue singlet to the tournament.
Ah, okay. I mean, but a tournament, Fargo, man, Fargo.
No. I'm saying I've done similar. I've done similar.
Yeah. All right,
but that right there, man, that's ballsy, and I loved it. No, that was awesome. I love that.
So let's jump to Joel.
Oh, by the way, quick shout
Adams.
out in that picture. That pink singlet is the New Jersey one I was talking about.
So let's jump to Joel Adams. And for those people who didn't see his wild match with Casper Stewart. We watched him get knocked out. We watched him come back. And at the end of it, he was so fired up. And my question is, he was a fiery competitor the entire time. Is that what we need for the sport? Is that good for the sport?
Yes. I think the old curmudgeons that talk about will act like you've been there before. If you say act like you've been there before, 9 times out of 10, you've never been anywhere.
I don't know that that's true. But okay.
I'm gonna say that. No, I'll say that. I don't care. This is my thing. If these guys put all this work in, they put all that effort in, and the blood, the sweat, and the tears. Wrestling is the most physically demanding sport of all time. This is a objective fact. The mental fortitudeness, that you have to be a wrestler at a high level, the amount you have to put in to your diet, your training, to your relationships with friends that you will lose to be at that high of a level. I don't care if a kid wants to talk his ish after he wins, but If you're gonna do that, you better be able to take it if you lose. My issue are the ones that can't take it and they like throw punches after matches. But if you celebrate and then you lose and someone
So for me, Joel didn't direct that at Casper Stewart. When in the finals, he didn't direct it at anybody else. He was simply fired up for himself. So I had no problem with it.
That was the other thing I was going to get to, is I think there's a difference between like flexing and doing a cartwheel backflip and like standing over a dude and pointing at him.
Right.
I think that there's a difference.
Right. And I'm not a big fan of the second one, but I'm totally fine with the first one.
I completely agree. That we need to get rid of. Yes. But if you're celebrating yourself and in the moment and celebrating the work you've put in, man, if you can't handle that, go watch golf. go do something else. Go argue with your nearest brick wall.
All right. So one of the things that happened before we got started in Fargo was that I got a chance to catch up with Dave Matthews. For those of you who don't know, Coach Matthews here in the state of Georgia, now lives in Colorado Springs, and he has developed, he's developed the PIN, or the Performance Index, which is very similar, like an ELO rating for chess. and things like that. And I think it's really, really fascinating. So first, let's jump to that interview so you can kind of understand some background before you and I get into it. Does that work?
Works for me.
All right. Here's my interview with Coach Matthews. All right, Coach Matthews. I still think of you as Coach Matthews. Yeah, all right, so we're talking ELO, PIN. Yep. So it's an ELO system, but it's called PIN?
Yes,
it's Performance Index?
The ELO system is basically a system that's a rating system that evolved from chess and has been done in chess, done in tennis, done in any combat type of sport where it's a one-to-one competition. Okay. When it's a team competition, ELOs don't work as effectively because of the fact of Tom Brady goes down for the Patriots are more likely to lose.
Right.
Whereas when it's one-on-one, you can say the one factor is you. So then you get that. So in one-to-one competition, it's a rating system. So chess uses it big time. And we call it the PIN system for Performance Index just because it's wrestling. PIN works for it. And that's exactly what it is. It's about performance.
So when did it start? How long ago did it start kind of forming into a thing?
Yeah, so about 2 years ago, we were really trying to figure out how can we do this, and I play a ton of chess, more than most people. And so in playing chess, it was like, I bet we could apply this to wrestling. There's no reason why we couldn't.
Right.
And then we started talking with the USOPC, and the USOPC actually does a rating system with an ELO, the same sort of thing. They do it a little differently than we do. They do it over a 4-year span and only certain tournaments, so maybe 40 tournaments out of that 4 years. And what they use it for is predictor of medals. And so they do it to try to say, hey, these are your best chances to have medals in the Olympics. And they do it across all sports, not just wrestling. And so we started talking to them, and then I was like, hey, I like that, but I think it needs to go deeper. Because taking certain events, the problem is a guy could have a bad tournament, or a guy could not be on the scene, but still be good, and you wouldn't know that.
Right.
So we went back to, hey, if we can get 5 years of data, and we started collecting data from all the different results that we could, not just USA events, but anything that we thought was relevant, and our states thought were relevant, and we started pulling them all together for over some 3 million certain results, and growing every day. It'll grow from this tournament here.
Yeah.
And so as we get those results in, it then starts to calculate and crunch the numbers to see, who would be your most consistent. And that's the thing. A PIN system is not a seeding. It's not saying, hey, this is the best guy, this is whatever. It's like, this is the most consistent guy, therefore he has the best chance to place in this tournament, do whatever.
In the future, will it be used for seeding though?
Yeah, so in the future, we already do this at a regional level, and we've done it at our national. Here at Fargo, we did not use it this year. Fargo has a committee behind it that has to be voted on. And since we just started the PIN system in the fall, using it for USA events, we couldn't use it at our national events because those have to go through a committee.
Got it.
So this year, the committee will vote on it. It'll be passed because they've liked the performance from it so far. And then once that gets passed, hopefully, we'll be using that from here on out for every USA event. On a senior level, we use it to do sort of a pre-seed guideline for our coaches, for our senior coaches. Uh-huh. But from that, it's sort of, it's what we use.
So you now kind of piloted it a little bit and looking at different things. Are you feeling pretty confident with kind of what it's predicting or how it's doing?
Yeah. So when we look at things, and this is where the human element comes in, right? So the human element looks at a single bracket to say, oh, that bracket's wrong, therefore it's whatever. But we look at the body of work, right? So you look at the body of work, a whole tournament. So I go through a tournament that we've used it in, and I start crunching numbers.
Right.
How many, and in our opinion of things, what we look for is how often are our top four, two of our top four seeded wrestlers, how often are they getting to the finals? And then out of the top 8 that we have independent rating, how often are those top 8 in your top 8? Okay, and usually the average is 6 to 6.5 of the top 8 are placing top 8. Because you have people that drop off, people that get upset, that sort of thing.
Sure.
And then we have about we run somewhere in the 85% for our top 4 into the final, or sorry, 90% into top 4. And then our champs are usually somewhere around 70%, 65-70% of them are our champs. Now there's the outliers, and the whole thing is about data. So if there's a state, and I'll use U15s this year. So U15s this year was kind of blown up from what we would have expected. That was the only tournament that was really blown out of proportion, and it was because of a lot of there was a state or two that had a lot of tough kids that we just didn't have the data on. So then when we see that, we fix it. We see that blown, okay, cool. We need to go to that state, say, hey, let's get some results. Let's put them in here so we can crunch the numbers, get them, where they need to be as far as sorted out.
So you're pulling data from like way down to the state level, the local level, all of that, and feeding it in to get that pin number.
Yeah, so states like Indiana, Illinois, Georgia, Texas, we have like 5 years of data on a lot of these teams, on a lot of these states. And so when I say 5 years data, we're talking from their kids tournament of 88 pounds through their high school seniors and senior level competitions, that sort of thing. And so we pull all that in to start looking at it. And we've broken the pin up into style specific. So you have your folk style pin, you have your freestyle pin, you have your Greco pin, and then you have a pin that's your composite. And so that way you can see kind of the whole thing of your body of work.
So what happens when like a kid goes from a 14U to a 16U or a 16U to a junior or something along those lines? Is their pin kind of adjusted because they haven't been wrestling against that level of competition?
No, it's not that it doesn't get adjusted.
Okay.
And, it's a good question. So it doesn't get adjusted. So everyone starts out at a certain number and then you start growing from it. So depending on when you started your career. And so, and it doesn't get adjusted by, and two things that it doesn't get adjusted by, and I'll tell you some instances. So it doesn't get adjusted by a kid coming up in age group, and it doesn't get adjusted if a kid goes up in weight or down in weight. Okay? It's not weight class specific, it's not age group specific. Because what you'll find, we had a kid at Folk Style Nationals who missed weight, was the number one guy at that weight, went up 2 weights, and guess what? He was number one guy at that weight, and he hammered it. You know? Because if you're good, you're good. Now, again, I said it's a separation. It's a way to separate. It's not a seeding. So just because it says, hey, this guy's the best guy, it's really just saying, hey, I identified this guy as a good kid. This kid's going to be good.
Right.
So, and we all know we have 14-year-old 14Us who are in 8th grade. They're like, hey, that kid's going to be a hammer in high school.
Correct.
So why penalize him when he gets to high school? Why is it not, hey, he comes in,
so just let it continue to go.
Let it continue. If he loses to good guys, it's going to bring him down.
Right.
If he loses to guys that aren't good, it's going to bring him down. So they'll adjust itself as they grow.
How does like inactivity have an impact, or does it have an impact?
So inactivity doesn't yet. We've talked about it, and we're looking into, hey, does inactivity play a part? But then I'll give you a great example. Adeline Gray this year, okay, was a year off.
Right.
All right. Blades was a year off. They were not in competition last year for injury and for pregnancy, having their twins.
Right.
All right. So with that, did they get worse? They were both in the finals and final legs, wrestling each other. So did they get worse?
No.
So then you look at it and you say, okay, so how do you justify what is time off?
Penalizing, right.
What is a penalize? Is it because he sat out a year? Well, they didn't get worse. Was it because he's injured? Blades was injured. Didn't get worse.
Right.
So it's like then you're asking the human element to it, and that's where any kind of calculations doesn't work. When you start saying, because you got to introduce human element.
Right. You're trying to remove that from the situation.
Yeah, we're trying to move it from the situation, because there are people that would say, no, Adeline's number one because she's got all the medals. All right. And there's others that say, well, she's been out a year, so she shouldn't be seated at all. She has to earn her way back in. It's like, what's okay? So what is the right thing?
Right.
And so for us, it doesn't. We haven't found a way to say, hey, time off equals that.
Got it.
Adam Kuhn took 4 years off and went and played football. Guess what? He came back. He's in the final legs. So it's like that's the sort of thing we're like. It's like, what is that? What does time off look like? What does that mean?
Yeah. So so for a person who has no clue what that 1100 means or whatever, can you just briefly explain kind of where you start at and how you accrue and how you maybe fall?
Yeah, so you start out at 1,000 points, and then you grow or go down based on wins and losses. And the way you gain points or lose points is based on the level of competition you're wrestling. So if you wrestle someone that is the same as you have a 50-50 chance of winning, you gain a certain amount of points.
Got
it.
Right? Mm-hmm.
If you lose to someone that's rated lower than you, then you lose more points than if you lost someone that was better than you or the same as you. So your points are adjusted based on how big of a swing it is between you and the other guy you're wrestling, or girl for that matter.
Yeah.
And so it just depends on how that wrestles. And so an 1,100, for instance, just means that, hey, they have probably a winning record and they're beating people that have been better than them or rated better than them to gain points to move up.
Because you started at 1,000.
Because you started at 1,000, yeah.
So how do you guys take into account things like, somebody gets DQ'd in a match, or there's an injury default in the tournament? Does that hurt you? How does that work?
Yeah, so we look for match determination. So if a DQ is a match determination because you wrestled a match and something happened to get DQ'd, whether it's illegal slam or anything like that.
Right.
So there was a DQ. So that counts against you. But medical forfeits, those sorts of injury defaults, those sorts of things, those don't count against you because the match wasn't determined. And so those things don't count against you.
So when can we expect to see? I mean, I just saw it on the mat.com, right? A list of top 15, and it's kind of fun actually to kind of go in and see the numbers and kind of see the different kids and kind of where they are and everything else. When will it be used at this level, in Fargo?
In Fargo. So Fargo, hopefully next year. It just has to go through the committees, and if it gets passed, which will be brought to committees this year, and if it gets passed, it goes through. Because that's the only reason we didn't use it this year is because that is a committee-based thing that gets voted on. So it's not something that we do straight out.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And so then, but I mean, it's like I said, it's already used at your regional level, which we control. So we did it there. Folk style nationals there. Preseason nationals is used there. So we've used it all over for the high school showcase, that sort of thing. So there's in our states. I mean, Indiana used it for their kids state tournament.
Oh, they did.
California, or not California, but Indiana has, and I can't remember. There's a couple of other states that have used it, and the results are like Indiana. Indiana Pat Kolb says, hey, we used it, and we've gotten less questions about the bracket than we did when we were seeding it,
right,
that sort of thing.
Right.
Because all right, we understand, we know where people are.
Well, and the other part is you don't feel like this person has an agenda or this person has a feeling or whatever. It strictly comes down to numbers.
Yep.
So, what's something I didn't ask that I should have asked about this?
I guess that's a good question. What did you ask that you should have asked? I guess the biggest thing is just understanding about it. All right. So with the pin system, it takes the human element out, right? So the whole point is taking that human element out, where it's not did a coach have a bias? Did the tournament think this guy was better? I guess here's the best part, right? So because we kind of talked about this before, it doesn't matter what tournament you wrestled in, because you can wrestle in a tournament that's a high caliber tournament, a Super 32, a Fargo, a Free Show, whatever.
Right.
And when you wrestle in that tournament, you could be in a bracket that isn't as tough as the toughest bracket in that tournament.
100%.
Or any tournament.
We'll see it here this week.
Exactly. And so when you do that, should the guy who wrestled in the weaker bracket, by ratings, get the same amount of credit as the guy who wrestled in the toughest bracket? That's why we have OWs. That's why we have these different awards. So it's like, no. So it does not look at your tournaments. It doesn't say, oh, he's this champion. Oh, he's this placer. It just says
all down to who you wrestled.
Yep.
Right.
And it's based on consistency. So the biggest thing I'd say is just think about it as it's consistency over time. Does it mean that you're not having that you're not in a slump? No. Does it mean that you're hot, that you're not hot right now? No. It just says over time, it's about consistency. So do it again. And that's what it always says. Just do it again. It's like, oh, you beat that guy? Great. Do it again.
Right.
You beat the state champ? Great. Do it again. And so that's the whole thing with it. It's just about consistency.
Coach, I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, no problem. Easy.
All right. So Coach Matthews, actually, we talked before the tournament started, obviously, based upon what you heard. And the thing that's really interesting is I think it's really good in that he focused on it's your performance and consistency over time. And they didn't use it this past weekend, but I was really interested to see how it might have kind of played out and whether it was better than kind of the seeding that they had used previously. All right.
Yeah.
So I took this. I'm going to show you this on a shared screen.
Yep.
All right. Can you see this?
Yes, I can.
All right. So what this is this is the 16U 94 pounders. Okay. And this is their pin. And you can see their number one pin coming in with 1,221 points was Nico DeSalvo of Iowa. He was seeded 9th. Okay. The number one seed was Case and Craft, who comes in number 10 on the pin. All right. With 1103. And then we got a bunch of wrestlers down here who were seeded in the top 16, but they didn't have a pin in the top 15. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So basically, I wanted to know, did it do a better job of predicting individual matchups? Not who was going to be first, second, third, fourth, or fifth, or whatever the case was, but individual matches. Because according to Pin, if you have a higher number, you should beat a lower number.
You're more likely to beat someone with a lower pin.
Correct. So was that true? Well, these guys didn't have pins, so that was so we can assume they are all lower than these guys, right?
Yeah.
All right. And we have 2 of them, both from the Southeast, Gabe Swan and Jose Cordero, who were both seeded and both made the podium. Okay. So I went through and I picked out all of the wins and losses for all the entire 94 bracket.
Yeah.
For the kids that were either seeded or had a pin. And if the pin was right, then I gave them a 1 as a correct prediction. And if their seeding was right, I gave them a 1 in that matchup if it was a correct prediction. 0 was they got that wrong. So Ross did not beat Swan. Okay. So in that situation, it did indeed work out that 76%, 77% of those that had a pin beat lower pin wrestlers. Okay. The seeding, they actually had, it was down in the low 70% in terms of the seeding predicting whether the person would win or not. So I guess the question is, do you like this idea of assigning a number based upon head to head as opposed to, the person defending state champion or whatever the case is?
So I would tend to agree that head to head is the better criterion. My only issue is, okay, doing it at the state tournament, I think you can do it because there's only so far a kid could wrestle in the state. The issue is when you use it for Fargo in a national event, you're not always going to see a lot of head-to-head matchups. So I feel like you end up with a very similar production to seeding, because at the end of the day, when you look at the pin criterion and what mattered most, eventually you did get to results at national events, and then you get into the same type of situation where what if a kid doesn't wrestle at the right tournaments, but he has a couple of head-to-head wins?
Yeah.
So I feel like you get the same type of principle at the end of the day.
So when I want to go back to this real quick. So on this, it's interesting to me that DeSalvo was the 9 seed, obviously based upon the criteria that they used, some type of separation criteria. Case and Craft was the 1 seed. He finished 6th.
Yeah.
He was pinned a 10, right? So it worked out in some situations. It didn't work out in all situations. And if we had redrawn the bracket so that it actually used this, it might have been really interesting to see how different it might have actually been.
I was going to say, I think to an extent, almost kind of just looking hindsight 2020 is a little bit unfair because of the fact that the matchups would have been entirely different.
They would have.
So that's my only thing is that it would have been weird because, let's just look at this for a second. So you would have had Shearer and Miles from Arizona be a round of 16 matchup. I don't know if they wrestled at all on the weekend.
Let's see. They did. Shearer beat Miles.
Okay. So I just feel like if you're going to seed it, I feel like you could then judge seeding. If you use pin, then you could judge pin. I feel like it's unfair to judge either one looking at the other because the matchups would have been entirely different.
Well, they would have been entirely different. But one of the things that's interesting, and actually, if you go to the 88s, The 8-8s are a little bit different because there were many fewer actually in the bracket than say the 94. I will say I do like what you said in terms of if you did it at the state tournament in the state of Georgia, right? You don't really the likelihood of having more head-to-head matchups is probably pretty good.
So that's like when I talked to the guys from Mississippi, quick shout out to Mississippi Wrestling Foundation, and we're trying to formulate my matrix to be better for seeding. There does come into some kind of play of, well, we know that you're likely to see every other team in your district. So when I see the district meets, it makes life a lot easier because I will have head-to-head matchups. Whereas if we talked about using this for Kansas City Stampede, the Knockout, Beast of the East, Super 32, Fargo, I feel like there might be some snags and some hangups where it doesn't necessarily fit the criteria. That's all. Make any seeding matrix system format, there's going to be flaws.
Yeah, but one of the things I do like about having a number is that you have that number based upon probability, and it's not like, some squishy criteria as it relates to, the person took third at this tournament versus the person took third at another tournament, and comparing them is kind of weird. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All right, let's move on and let's jump to probably the biggest event for this past weekend, Deep South Duels. 91 teams came in from a lot of different places. You shared some conversation with me where some people were not very happy, but I'm going to touch on a couple of things that I thought were really good about it. Number one, I wasn't there. So I want to make sure that everybody knows that Lucas and I had just gotten back from Fargo. Lucas was still working through his stuff. So I can only tell you what I saw from afar. Okay. Yeah. Number two, I from looking at the results and watching some of when track wasn't down and the information that we were able to get, it looks like the level of competition was really pretty good. Like
I feel like that was kind of consensus. Was the competition was the farthest thing from the issue at this tournament.
Right. No, it definitely had a level of competition. The Indiana Outlaws, I think they won, but they had a bunch of Florida kids on their team. It was kind of interesting. They kind of interjected. The other part that kind of stood out to me, and I wrote this in the 5 things to know from the Deep South, and I didn't get into the details that Lucas had shared with me, kind of on another path and so on and so forth. But one of the things that stood out to me was I really liked the fact that there were some all-star teams, but there was also like teams that had core groups of kids. Like Level Up brought a core group of kids. Storm had Riley Brewer and a couple of core group of kids that are Storm kids, so on and so forth. I like the fact that you see those core groups of kids kind of travel together, compete for one another, outside of the season. I thought that was a lot of fun because, you go to junior duels or you go to this, you get a Team Georgia, and while they're all Georgians, doesn't mean that they all train with one another. You know what I mean?
No, I completely agree. I also like that. And I feel like as a guy who's starting, to get a club going and getting that, I feel like the big thing is always keeping your core group and knowing who you can really rely on. And then when you pick up other people, okay, yeah, but yeah.
Well, and you're going to pick up 1 or 2 or 3 because you've got a kid who, is playing football or steps out or whatever the case is. Right. But having that core group of kids, their strong house, I saw them, so on and so forth. It was just nice to see those kind of kids kind of compete with one another. So that was Deep South Duels. And our last thing is our Southeast 7.
And I got to get my other notebook. I forgot I had that in the other notebook. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. You can tell this is live.
He still keeps notebooks, handwritten, everything else. So before we jump to the Southeast 7, Lucas, I want to make sure that I understand the parameters. Okay. And the parameters being high school age, not youth, right? There's no youth age in it. consider?
It's predominantly high school. You know, if they wrestle 14U, then I guess upper middle school could be involved.
Okay.
High school and up. And I'm not necessarily taking college, but like when we go to a tournament like the US Open, if they represent a state in the Southeast, not Wolfpack Wrestling Club, of course, due to, you know, having Pennsylvanians represent them. But beyond that, that's the basic gist of this. And then the other thing is, ladies and gentlemen, it's a power ranking. This is not me talking about what state is the best. This is as of previous performances kind of layered on top of one another.
Right. So, and most recent performance holds
will
more
take
weight.
precedence. Well, but if a state has we actually do have a situation where we'll get to it when I get to it, where a state had an incredible run, but on the whole, they haven't done enough yet. So we'll kind of get there when we get there.
All right. So let's start down at the bottom, because you already demonstrated that you can count up. So we're going to do that.
Yeah.
All right.
Number 7, it's the state of Mississippi. They're yet to formally compete in bigger events. However, I being in contact, guys will be attending some big national tournaments, Super 32, things of that nature. They will have a duels and a Fargo team next year. You know, as they will be outfitted by Fat and Scrappy brand. Not to brag, but you know, I'm very excited about that. But yeah, Mississippi will get, as they get more, they'll start to be more included into this list.
All right. So now to our core 6 that have been part of my SE Wrestle for a long time. Coming in at number 6 is?
Number 6, they dropped 2 spots from their previous ranking. It's the state of North Carolina. Big things for me. They had one All-American at they had one All-American at Fargo. As a team, they didn't finish in placements. They only scored points once, and they were in, I think, 21st. Their highest duels placement was in 14U Women's Greco. They finished 9th, and in Junior Women's Greco, they finished 16th. They just didn't have a good freestyle run at these national events. So for me, North Carolina comes in at 6.
Well, and just so everybody knows, North Carolina has not had as much freestyle and Greco presence as some of the other states. You know, I don't know what it is. I don't know why we have a lot of presence with, you know, a Tyrant tournament, or I mean, maybe it's focused on folk style as opposed to freestyle and Greco. But I will say, I agree with you, Lucas, in that this season is hand locking season. We just wrapped it up, and it does play a role, and especially on a national stage. Now, Savoy New, Cameron Stinson, all of them wrestled great. But
yeah, that's not.
But as a whole,
I think we even talked about it, that, you know, being that this is a fluid list, there are teams that are like Florida, for instance. They always have a great freestyle and Greco season, so they results will get skewed a little bit. But obviously, this is again a power ranking and a fluid list.
Number 5,
the state of South Carolina. They move up 1 spot. 2 Fargo All-Americans. They finish All-American team in 14U Women's Greco National Duels, finishing in 8th. Listen, they showed out. Zaya Estrada did her thing. JJP
and men's Greco too.
I was getting there. And beach Greco, and in some team performances as well. Some highs for the state. In junior boys Greco, finishing 29th. They've been in the low 30s basically their entire run. So while it sounds a type of way, 29th is a decent finish for them. And I hope that means a continuation of growth for the Palmetto State. Quick shout out South Carolina. They move up 1, moving into 5th.
All right. And I'm glad you brought up JJ Peace. I thought he wrestled great. Doesn't have a ton of freestyle experience, but man, if you can finish top 8 in junior Greco or junior freestyle 120, ooh. Yeah. All right. So number 4
is Alabama. They come in with 5 Fargo All-Americans. In junior boys freestyle, they finished in 16th place. They wrestled pretty well. 13th in junior boys Greco as well. That's their highest finish of a junior Greco finish at duels. Guys like the Simon brothers wrestled real well. John Stewart. You know, they wrestled really good this weekend. They move up 1 where they should be. They are in 4th as we head in now to the folk style season.
Well, and Elizabeth Holmes Smith, I mean, just again.
How did I almost forget Evelyn?
And the other part, and I don't know that Lucas has seen this yet, but shout out to the state of Alabama. Girls are now sanctioned starting next year.
Yes,
right?
No, that's huge. That is really good. I did see that, and thank you for not letting me slip by that. Very good point.
Number 3.
Shout out to State of Tennessee. So this top 3 has gotten even closer than it was. In number 3 for me, it's the state of Tennessee. They finished still in 3rd, but they inch closer to that top 2. 12 All-Americans, 2 Fargo champions, 8th in both 16U Greco and freestyle, 2 team All-American performances at duels, finishing in 6th in 14U women's freestyle, and 8th in boys 16U freestyle. 8th in Greco, 16th in freestyle, which was the highest of the Southeast, 19th in junior boys Greco, which was 3rd highest, and 12th in junior women's freestyle. That was 2nd highest of the entire Southeast. Listen, they've had a real good freestyle and Greco season. We know how they come. Boom Ranch, Cleveland, Father Ryan, Signal Mountain. I go on and on. We know the bag you get with Tennessee. They inch closer to the top 2. They get there. They're now in striking distance. But for me, they're still a 3rd.
Yeah, well, and I think you actually hit, you hit all the points. Cleveland, Summit, Christian Brothers, Dobbins Bennett, those high school teams are going to continue to do exceptionally well as well. I think the biggest challenge, as far as the top tier, Tennessee is equal with Florida and Georgia, in my opinion.
Completely agree.
The question is that the depth may be a little bit behind. That might be why they're number 3. And they just have many fewer athletes. Many fewer wrestlers because population is smaller.
It's a numbers game for me. So they finish in 3rd in Fargo All-Americans. They're the only state in the Southeast, though, to All-American in 2 styles at Fargo in the same age group. So look, we know what they can do. It's just a numbers game at this point.
Yeah. All right. So number 2.
Number 2, and ladies and gentlemen, this one pains me. And I have to say it, and this is where I'm gonna also kind of parlay into another quick point. Number 2, it's the state of Florida. 14 Fargo All-Americans, 2 champions, 7th and 16U freestyle. And national duels, they finished the team All-American and boys 14U freestyle, finishing in 8th. Do you want to know where they got no help this weekend?
It wasn't the girls. It wasn't the girls because the girls were off the charts.
Off the charts in the wrong way. At
What?
Fargo to Georgia.
Oh, you said Florida.
Did I actually?
Yes, you said Florida was number 2.
I botched it. Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen. Georgia finished. It moves down a spot into 2nd.
Because I was surprised. I thought you were going to say Georgia.
No, so Georgia finishes in 2nd. And for me, here's the big thing. Florida, 17 Fargo All-Americans. Georgia, 15. So they were really similar. Here's the problem. 7 Fargo champions for Florida. 2 for Georgia. And as you said, 4 of them come from the women's. Listen, this is my thing with the girls. And talk to Donnell Bradley. I told them this was coming. Genevieve on, Elle Kaufman, Garbazovas, Eaton, Betances. I'm missing people. The talent in Georgia on the girls is not the issue by any means. They didn't perform for whatever reason. It wasn't. When you and me talked, I said each age group could have got 5 placers. And you could name them. That wasn't a stretch.
Right.
But they get 0 between the 2.
Yes.
That really doesn't help matters when on the boys you were pretty level, the girls Georgia had an edge. Now all of a sudden you come to Fargo, Florida outplaces you in everything, and now I can make the argument the women's you don't have the advantage because of the way they performed. So in their rightful spot at number 1, moving up a spot, first time atop the list, it is the state of Florida, which is,
even though he hates their singlets.
Yeah, hate the singlets. If this was a fashion contest, they'd be 8th. The buy would be ahead of them.
So I agree with you. I mean, the Florida women really performed exceptionally well. You throw in Mako, who was a double champ. Now, I will say, Georgia's 16U boys were fantastic. Levy, Wilder, Stifler,
So this is what's
Swan,
interesting.
really, really talented. But, and then you had Paradise and Hope Poe, and Sequoia making the finals, and Bambinelli was an All-American in Greco. I think the boys were pretty similar, but I agree with you. The girls for Florida were outstanding.
So Florida's Georgia's only argument is in 16U. 16U boys freestyle. Georgia has 2 champions to Florida's 1. All-Americans, they both have you. In Greco, Florida has 1 champion and Georgia's 0. But in All-Americans, Georgia has Florida's 1. Florida finished in 12th in freestyle, DMP in Greco. Georgia finished 7th in freestyle, 12th in Greco. So their only real argument is in 16U, but it's not as if they trounced Florida. Florida hung in with them in 16U.
Right.
It's just junior men went to Florida. The women went to Florida at duels in highest performances for the Southeast. Georgia and Florida both had 3, but their median performance, Florida's median performance is higher at 14.9. So Georgia's 16.3.
All right, guys.
Just on this Southeast 7 ranking, Florida takes the lead, and they will be in first place.
All right, so we've got Cars duels, we've got Georgia and Florida Super 32 early entry tournaments, we've got Super 32 itself, maybe the Grappler Fall Classic. I assume those are the 5 big ones that might play into the next edition.
I think the next rankings, I don't want to say this, but I think I want to wait till Halloween, because I want to wait till all that happens, because there is so much, but we also have this month of August where it's a little downtime. You get into September, then you have some of the qualifiers, and then you hit October, Grappler Super 32. So we're going to wait until about Super 32, October, Halloween range. That'll be Southeast 7, number 3. And I'm expecting some changes there, when you really start thinking about some of the guys for all the states. It'll be interesting. But, yep, I'm thinking Southeast 7, number 3 will come out around Halloween.
All right. So for next week, Lucas and I have a few things on tap, but one of the things I'm most interested to share with everyone is the fact that I got a chance to talk with Obi Blanc, North Dakota State head coach, also from the state of Florida. And Lucas got to do an interview with Monty Mills and Tyler Sequoia about their choices of going to NDSU. It was a lot of fun on Thursday. You and I had a great time. We're going to drop that next week.